So take a good long look at this aquarium. Take a look. According to every major aquarium guru, influencer, and industry expert on the internet, this tank shouldn't exist. These plants should be dead. At the very least, they should be struggling, right? Melting, covered in algae. But it's not. In fact, this giant mass of Italian Val or Vallisneria is thriving. We see some runners shooting off here into this open space. What we have here is what I would call probably the easiest planted aquarium to run, but I like to call this style of aquarium a minimalist aquascape. There's no hardscape, there's no wood, and it's just plants, water, and livestock. And I've never added any fertilizers or root tabs. I just have a quality aquarium light. And I do have a filter running on this aquarium. So what you're looking at is a completely bare bottom 20-gallon tall. This is just an Aquarium 20-gallon aquarium. And this 20-gallon tall aquarium is important because it's physical, undeniable proof of a concept that the modern aquarium industry desperately wants you to ignore. And that's the absolute powerhouse that is standard, everyday aquarium waste. We see some here on the bottom of this aquarium. Now, before people start flooding the comments or making reaction videos, let me be very clear about what I am not saying today. I'm not saying that I hate Substrate. I'm not commanding my audience to remove their substrate. I'm not saying rip out your sand, dump out the dirt. And I'm not telling you to never use fertilizers or to let the aquarium waste pile up and never remove it. I'm not saying any extreme instructions to my audience, and I'm not selling any products. So substrate's fine, and fertilizers, when you look at them and use them in a proper context, they're fine as well. So I use bare bottom aquariums like this with no substrate for my content at times and for my own personal observations of how these plants do without any substrate whatsoever, whether it be a nutrient-rich substrate like aqua soil or a dirted tank, or even inert substrates like sand or gravel. So I stumbled across the realization about these aquarium plants basically by accident. I had some spare plants that I was going to trade, and I just needed a place to store them for a little while. And so I stuck them in a bare bottom aquarium, much like this, that had no plants in it at the time. Now, what I thought was going to be storing these plants for like a week quickly turned into 2 weeks, and then it turned into 2 months. And before I knew it, I was growing aquarium plants without any substrate at all. Now, how did I do that? Well, the way that I did it is seen in this aquarium and in any of my no substrate aquariums, and that is by simply weighing the plants down. So if we look right smack dab in the middle here, you'll see an Amazon sword, one of the famous heavy root feeders. The hobby loves to call Amazon swords a heavy root feeder. What does that even mean? Has anyone actually ever measured an Amazon sword's feeding to know if it's feeding more heavily from its roots or from its leaves or its stems? No, it's never been done before. The observation about plants like this Amazon sword that say that they're heavy root feeders, all that is people looking at this plant, which this is a small size Amazon sword. I started it from a little piece of the base of a larger plant. But as you can see, it's just weighed down with a plant weight. Now, Amazon swords have pretty big roots compared to the size of the plant. It's a big plant with a big root mass. So a normal person looks at this plant that has a big root structure, and a normal assumption to make is that Amazon swords are heavy root feeders. Now, if that plant was not weighed down, it would just float away. So all aquarium plants have root masses that are relative to the size of the plant. A great example here is pearlweed. This pearlweed is pretty long. Pearlweed can grow pretty tall, but it's a very small, thin plant with tiny little leaves, and it doesn't take much of a root mass to hold a single strand of pearlweed down. Now, right next to that, we've got another stem plant. This is Bacopa. The Bacopa is also simply weighed down in this aquarium. And although there are some aerial roots shooting out along the stem of that Bacopa, let me move this Amazon sword out of the way. You'll notice that the root mass down here is what would anchor the plant and hold the plant down so that it doesn't float away. Now, do aquarium plants uptake nutrients from their roots? Sure, they do. But they can uptake nutrients from anywhere, from the stem, from the leaves. And plants are all about precision. So an aquarium plant is not going to uptake nutrients from way down at the tip of a root and use energy to move those nutrients all the way up the plant to the tip of the top of the plant to grow the plant taller. That uses a lot of energy. If this plant can get away with it, it's going to take in nutrients from the very top of the plant so that it doesn't need to use energy moving those nutrients around. Now, in our aquariums, you'll find that there are, I call them aquarium gurus out there, who have decided for everyone in the hobby that you need to have 40 parts per million of extra nitrate in your water. Now, why would they claim that? Well, 40 parts per million is about the highest you can get before it starts hurting your livestock. Your fish and your shrimp and your snails start to suffer once the nitrate gets above 40 parts per million. But these brands that sell fertilizer are instructing their viewers on social media to load up their water column with so much nitrate that they have excess nitrate in the highest possible concentration before it starts to do real harm to the livestock. This means you're going to use the maximum amount of their product. Now, why do I say that? Because in most planted aquariums, if you're not adding nitrates via fertilizer, you're probably going to see 0 nitrates on your nitrate test. That's one of the things that new aquarists often get kind of tricked about. Is we're taught about the nitrogen cycle and how fish release ammonia from their gills, and that ammonia goes right into the water column. We're told that fish create waste that sinks down at the bottom of the aquarium as well. Basically pee from their gills and they poop out, and that poop gets broken down by decomposer bacteria and it releases nutrients into the water as well. But as far as that ammonia goes that's released by your fish's gills, through the nitrogen cycle in our aquariums, it gets slowly turned into nitrate. And what many new aquarists get kind of tricked into is thinking that they have become a master horticulturist or a master aquarist, because once they get plants, their test kits start showing 0 nitrates, and they think, oh, wow, if I have 0 nitrates, well, then I guess I don't need to change my water anymore. And the normal life cycle for most aquarists is that they then find out that there's a lot of things that build up in our aquariums that does not evaporate out and does not get used up by plants, that the only way we can get those bad things out is through water changes. Even if our test kit says 0 nitrates, there might be things, and there probably are things building up like hormones and all kinds of other stuff that we're going to need to reduce, or it eventually is going to harm our livestock long term. And that's not even mentioning what's called old tank syndrome. Old tank syndrome is basically not changing your water, and eventually your water conditions get so far away from your source water that through the deletion of minerals and other complicated science, eventually your pH crashes. And when that happens, your fish get really sick. And so the first thing that most aquarists do is a big water change. Well, because you've never changed your water, the water in your aquarium and the water that comes out of your tap are so far apart that it further shocks the fish. And it's a big deal. Old tank syndrome is a big deal. It's not anything new. It's been around for a long time. So if those things are a thing, then how is it that we have top channels here on YouTube that happen to sell aquarium products like substrate enhancers and liquid fertilizers, making these rules for us that seem so nonsensical? Well, we're going to talk about that. So in these plants' natural environments, if they don't have roots holding them down, they're going to float away. And that doesn't mean they're just going to float out into the ocean eventually and die, although that can happen. Typically what happens is they get windswept. Once they float to the top of the surface in a pond or a creek or a river or a stream or a lake, the wind moves them up against the shore. And now they're just in a couple inches of water and they die. So these plants have a vested interest into anchoring themselves down in a situation where they can grow straight up. Now, another key element here is when you start floating a bunch of plants at the top of the aquarium, like you see here, look at this. We've got a runner of dwarf sag just chilling at the top of the aquarium. Now, that works fine for dwarf sag if there's not too much of it up there. If you have a bunch of stem plants floating at the top of your aquarium, what's going to happen eventually is they're going to start melting because they just get too crowded. They start to crowd each other out. So I wanted a way that I can grow the plants from the bottom of the tank without using substrate. And the easiest way for me to do that was to look at what people were already doing. So plant weights was a great way to do that. When you buy your plants at the pet store, usually it's a bundle of plants with a plant weight wrapped around it. When it comes to a giant amount of valve like this, and as this valve grows, the roots kind of become intertwined with each other and it forms a big mass of plants here. As you can see, there's a bunch of aquarium waste that kind of gets caught up under the plants. But these plants are doing phenomenal. So you've got basically an entire wing of the aquarium industry telling viewers that they absolutely need liquid fertilizer. They hop on the camera holding a bottle of their special proprietary all-in-one fertilizer and tell you that aquarium success is just a squirt away. 1 squirt per 10 gallons is the magic bullet. But if you actually sit down and do the math based on the ingredients involved, 1 squirt in 10 gallons is nowhere near enough to achieve what they're telling you to achieve. Why? Well, these same exact influencers are the ones telling their viewers they need to chase 40 parts per million of excess nitrate in their water column. They preach 40 parts per million like it's gospel. But if you take a standard 10-gallon tank with 0 nitrate and you add a single squirt of their miracle liquid, you're not going to hit 40 parts per million. Not even close. Depending on the exact guaranteed analysis of the product, it's going to take vastly more than that, sometimes upward of 8 to 13 squirts just to actually raise 10 gallons of water from 0 to 40 ppm. So which is it? Is it a squirt or is it a quarter of a bottle? And more importantly, if this fertilizer is all in one, does that mean the massive cocktail of micro and macronutrients? How do we even know that every single aquarium with every specific stocking load of fish, every unique lighting situation needs those exact ingredients in that exact formulation? We don't know. It's BS. And it gets worse. In their own advertising and live streams for these products, they make wild, outlandish claims. There's a video that's been public for 7 years now that makes a strange claim. This major industry player literally claims that their fertilizer contains trace elements, but they have no idea how much of those elements are even in the product. They explicitly claim there are trace elements in the bottle that they can't even detect. If you're selling a commercial agricultural product and you admit on camera that you cannot detect the ingredients you're claiming are inside, you're admitting that you can't pass a basic state guaranteed analysis test. And yet, nobody cares. Nobody points it out. Why? Well, because the average aquarist is not looking to play chemist. They aren't that complicated. They just want something that works. What they don't realize is that their aquariums already have what works. Aquarium waste. Whether you remove your waste daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, never, your aquariums are producing that waste 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That waste is constantly breaking down, releasing a slow, steady drip of exactly what plants need to survive and thrive. But the influencers don't want to talk about aquarium waste. I saw one popular industry plant of an aquascaping influencer here in America that is heavily sponsored by fertilizer companies. And recently he put out a YouTube short talking about how fish produce ammonia directly from their gills, which turns into nitrate for the plants. But what's his conclusion? That it's not enough. He makes his video about how fish don't produce enough ammonia and therefore enough nitrate to feed a planted tank. And so fertilizers are required. He doesn't say a single word about the solid aquarium waste that's breaking down in that aquarium. He just ignores half of the biological process so that the narrative is you need to buy supplements. So on the screen here, you'll see I've got up my aquarium waste analysis from a soil and wastewater lab. This shows you everything that's in my aquarium waste. The only way to know what's in your aquarium waste is to simply have your aquarium waste tested. Every state in the United States has a state-accredited soil and wastewater analysis lab. And in my experience, the ones that exist at colleges and universities are very fast and affordable compared to online soil and wastewater testing services. Then we have the other side of the coin, side B, the natural aquarium gurus. If the liquid fertilizer guys are selling you chemistry, the natural gurus are selling you ideology. It's just as manipulative. These influencers use specific methods of deep, complex substrates to lie to viewers. They promise that if you just follow their exact method, somehow you're going to have less maintenance. That's right. They claim that if you add more stuff to a glass box of water, you'll need to clean it less because nature. They go out of their way to tell you that dirty, nasty, stagnant-looking aquariums are natural, and that this visual mess is what makes the tank self-sustaining. They use crazy proprietary mixes of substrate enhancers containing wild off-the-wall ingredients, things like bat poop. They claim you'll never need to do a water change again in your life if you just buy their specialized dirt mix and follow their complicated, ever-changing instructions. It's obvious BS, designed specifically to rage bait experienced hobbyists into engaging with their content, while simultaneously trapping beginners in a cycle of failure. In the ultimate hypocrisy, If you've been paying attention over the last year or so, those same natural aquarium gurus have quietly started changing their tune. The guys who told you to never touch your water are now doing water changes. The guys who told you to never feed your fish are not only feeding their fish, but they're actively selling fish food. They're basically just pretending to be regular fish keepers now, hoping nobody notices the pivot. All this does is make the hobby incredibly confusing and frustrating for both new and experienced fish keepers who are just trying to find a straight answer. So where does that leave us? If side A is lying about the math of their magic liquids, and side B is lying about the magic of their bat poop dirt, what's the actual truth here of fish keeping and planted tanks? The truth is, as a hobby, we're flying blind. At best, the average aquarist is only testing for nitrate. Maybe phosphate if they're really dedicated. We don't test for iron, zinc, molybdenum, or any of the micronutrients that are supposedly in these fertilizers. We couldn't tell even if we wanted to. There's no hobbyist drop checker kit for that. So how will we really ever know what our individual tanks truly need? We don't, and we can't. All we can really do is monitor new growths for signs of deficiencies. That's the only real metric of success. Look at my tanks that use absolutely nothing but aquarium waste. I don't see any signs of deficiencies. The plants are lush, green, and spreading. The only time I've ever run into an issue was just using natural aquarium waste in one specific tank. It was a heavily planted setup with just a single bed of fish inside. The fast-growing stem plants in that tank did not do well. They were stalling out. Why? Because a single bed of fish just doesn't produce enough biological waste to feed a jungle of fast-growing stem plants. The betta would attack any shrimp I put in there. So I added a bunch of snails. What happened? And the overall amount of waste in the tank went way up. The biological machine started churning. And suddenly, the fast-growing plants absolutely exploded. They thrived. I didn't need to buy a $20 bottle of mystery liquid, and I did not need to rebuild a tank with 3 inches of proprietary bat guano substrate. I just needed to let the aquarium's natural waste cycle scale up to match the plant load. Aquarists, stop overcomplicating your glass boxes just because someone on the internet told you to. You don't need to chase an arbitrary 40 parts per million of nitrate just because a guy selling a nitrate-heavy fertilizer told you it's the optimal number. You don't need to throw away your test kits and let your tank turn into a swamp just because a guy selling dirt told you it's natural. Watch your plants. Watch your fish. Let the waste do the job. Because the one fact that dismantles every aquarium guru on the internet is this: nature has been growing aquatic plants using nothing but fish poop for millions of years, and it doesn't need a YouTube influencer to make it work. If you're looking for more context on how the aquarium space handles some of these pervasive myths, you might find this interesting. Check out my channel for more videos on aquariums outside the echo chamber. They offer a look at some of the persistent misunderstandings that keep beginners stuck in cycles of stress and overcorrection. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.